ILEA, take it away.
Hello, everyone. Good morning, good afternoon, good evening, wherever you are joining us from in the world. Extending Ashley's thank you to all of you, our esteemed ILEA members, and also obviously non-members. Thank you for joining us here today. I'm very, very excited about the next hour ahead of us. So before we jump in and introduce the panel, obviously you've joined this ILEA webinar. ILEA is the International Live Events Association, which is the principal association representing creative event professionals globally. As Ashley said, I will be the moderator here today. I am currently the regional VP for the EMEA region within ILEA, but I also have a day job. And in my day job, I am the Global Strategic Growth Director for Evesio. We are an events management software predominantly for awards and conferences. I've been in the tech space for the past sort of 6 to 7 years and followed the evolution of AI. So I'm very interested and very excited to be discussing that here with you today. So let's start by introducing the wonderful panel we've got with us here today before we kick off. So Summer, let's start with you.
Hi, everyone. My name is Summer Gay. I am the CEO and founder of Launch Marketing Co. We are focused on the events and hospitality industry, all things digital marketing. I'm also the VP of Marcom for the ILEA Greater Chicago chapter.
Thank you, Summer. Marco?
Yeah, hi, everyone. Marco Chavira here. I'm a VP of Sales and Go-to-Market at Unique. Unique is a company that leverages AI and a 3D animation system to generate digital humans. And digital humans are interactive avatars that can help in a number of different use cases. I'm sure we'll talk about them today at some point or another.
I'm sure we will. And last but not least, RJ.
Hello, everyone. Great to be here. My name is RJ Crowder-Schaefer. I am the global head for event product and technology at Bloomberg. Greetings to everyone. I'm here in Midtown Manhattan. My team at Bloomberg oversees the vendor onboarding, technology management, and execution of technology within our events portfolio. Globally, that's about 2,000 plus events a year across all the different businesses here at Bloomberg. And my team also oversees the data collection and analysis from an event side as well. So kind of the tech and the data side in managing both of those.
Awesome. Thank you so much, RJ. And obviously, as everyone can see, we have a very wide range of sort of knowledge panelists today from different angles, both from an organizer, attendee, but also obviously the sort of end buyer, so to say, as well. So before we start talking about some of these subjects around AI, I just want to sort of set the scene. What is AI, right? I think we all have some idea of what it is because it's actually been around for a very, very long time already, although we may not be aware of it. So AI is the science of making machines think like human, in a sense. So it's enabling these machines to do things that are considered smart. But what they can do very differently is process a huge amount of data that maybe humans cannot do. And there's obviously several different ways of looking at AIs, but it has been widely discussed that we can break it down into 4 different types of AI currently. So we have the reactive aspect, which basically has no memory. They only respond to stimuli. You will all probably be aware that these exist in terms of the chatbots, but they are just responding to almost like a document. So if you ask the right question, it's going to give you the answer. Otherwise, they're really struggling to make any adjustive answers. Whilst moving into limited memory, which is the most commonly used right now, and it's also what we could probably say is the generative AI in essence, which has a memory, and they use that memory to learn and improve its responses in terms of how we move forward with that. The other 2 aspects, theory of mind and self-aware, is the future of AI, so to say. It's still being worked on. It's a concept right now, and it's work in progress. And some of this is probably where it gets a little bit scary, but we'll discuss that as well. So the theory of mind is sort of where it understands intelligence entities, so emotions, beliefs, and thought processes. whilst the self-aware is in essence becoming a human, having a human-like intelligence. But one of the things, so as you can see here, we're just at the tip, it should be, of the iceberg, of the AI iceberg, in essence, where we stand right now. But it's such a hot topic that we do need to discuss, how is this impacting us? How can we implement this in the right way and use it ethically, which is some of the subjects we'll talk about today. But when we were talking prior to obviously this webinar, the lovely panel, Marco raised a very interesting point that I want to start off with here, is that it's not only about the types of AI that we've got, but it's also implementing different layers of AI within some of the technology. So Marco, can you expand on that? What do you mean about different layers of AI?
Yeah, it's a good question. And I think it just takes a moment to think about the evolution of, what we're coining as AI from, we'll just take the last 6, 7, 8 years. And so, and I think the three themes we'll talk about today are kind of chatbot 1.0, which is really for, in most senses, what the technology you use when you land on United Airlines and you're trying to figure out how to get past that chatbot really quickly and ultimately talk to a human. Like that's not even, we won't even consider that AI. That's basically in the back end kind of a structure that is, like the storybooks you used to read, choose your own adventure, but there's some basic calculation. I won't even call it calculation. There's basically a diagram that is a tree that allows you to, you say talk to an operator, it's just going to coordinate that, or it says, find out about, I don't know, change it, purchase a new ticket. It's just going to direct you right there. So some really basic technology within that. The really exciting layers that I think that we'll talk about today is, AI, artificial intelligence, anything that mimics human cognition. So these are the big complex language models that have been in use, quite a bit for a number of different use cases over the last, we'll say, quite a while, but over the last, say, 6, 7 years, we've really seen them implemented in kind of the back end of a lot of technology. And so these are like big rule-based algorithmic systems that you've probably heard of, like neural networks or deep learning. And this has been implemented in a number of different ways in technology, but you haven't always really seen it in effect. And so that's the kind of the historical bucket of AI. And then what's really, what's getting a lot of buzz today is generative AI, which is that next layer on top of kind of a language model or traditional AI that actually leverages some new architecture like transformers, such as ChatGPT, or which is a transformer technology, or GANs, which produce really cool images and videos and whatnot. And so generative AI is built on top of that kind of traditional AI to create new content. And that's where we're seeing a lot of this new technology, deep fakes and videos and images and content that's actually being created through generative AI. So a few different layers that I think we'll touch on today.
Yeah, and I think it's interesting because I think sometimes we don't know what AI we're maybe implementing, right? So here we're drilling down into a little bit more of that detail. So thank you for that, and I think that's is super interesting, and we'll cover a lot of these topics. But moving on to then, you mentioned obviously generative AI can create new content, images, etc. And Summer, I know that you use this throughout your business and for your clients' events. So can you tell us a little bit how you implement and how you use AI in these ways to become more efficient and, create better content, I guess?
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, there's two real main ways that I use it. And the first is going to be on the content side, right? I really use it to help me whiteboard. We were recently sourcing speakers for an event, and I was able to come up with 3 or 4 kind of very similar topics to send out and say, do any of these really fit, what you can speak on and that kind of thing. And it really helps just create that to get us to that point quickly where we could then move forward with trying to refine the contents to fit the event and the speakers that we were trying to source for the event. But on the other side, on the production side, and I was a banquet manager for a lot of years, so I have a very, very deep operations background, and it's got a lot of practical uses. We use it to build production schedules, build run of show, be able to pull in speaker info and exhibitor info and all of that kind of stuff, and be able to then create today, actually later this afternoon, we're doing a webinar for a bunch of exhibitors, and we used generative AI to come up with what they needed to know while they were on site and all of these other things and details to really help it. Obviously we live in an organized chaos environment, and those of us that love it, like, that's what we do, is we corral it, we make it organized, we make it functional, we make it practical. And being able to use generative AI to really shorten that process, and to then continue to further take it a step further and really wrangle and organize more and more, so that when we are on site and things do pop up, we're able to focus over there and fix those kind of fires that we see coming, versus being pulled so far in the other direction because we're still stuck in that organized chaos mode.
So I guess it's obviously using it both from a production perspective, but also the marketing aspect. And I think the marketing aspect is what most people commonly know nowadays, right? So it's really interesting to hear that you use it from an organizer perspective, because if you can use that, it frees up your time to focus on some of the other things, right? The real life experiences. And, we'll definitely talk about this a bit later around the ethical use as well of AI. But RJ, I'm interested to hear from your perspective. You work obviously for a huge global company. You mentioned you run 2,000 plus events a year. How has the implementation of AI looked for you?
Yeah, so I think, to be candid, we're very much in exploratory phases right now. And the kind of the position of my team within the company and within the events organization is we are more focused on the production and execution of events versus more kind of the marketing content creation side of things. We have a whole team of people that work on that, and that's their profession, that's their job. That doesn't mean that we don't kind of think about those areas and kind of and how some of the tools that we use that touch on the content side, for example, like registration platforms and other things like that, where you're hosting content, how those can come into play when it comes to AI. But I think our approach to AI is very similar to our approach to really any technology within events. We think about it kind of split between two areas: one, the front end, and the back end. And I know that's not really a novel concept here, but I think it's helpful for a lot of our stakeholders if we start to kind of break things down between the front end, what's actually being visible or what's visible to our attendees, our end users, our clients. What content are we generating that they're going to ultimately see? What tools are they interacting with throughout the event experience that might shape their thoughts and feelings about the event and the content that's being distributed to them? And then on the back end, thinking more about like data analysis. How are we capturing data? How are we analyzing it? And also the production side. So what tools, technologies are we using to enhance the production for our events overall? And I think, that's been helpful for us, like I said, for our tech stack overall, but specifically with AI, and kind of going back to Marco's point, maybe a slightly different variation of his point, but this idea of like different layers of AI and thinking, if we have, the way that I envision our tech stack is kind of like a hub and spoke model, right? We have the centralized point and then kind of different technologies that we can layer on in that event. And I think oftentimes people think AI is this big new thing that's going to come in and just sit on top of everything and take over, when instead we've kind of, at least internally here, kind of scaled back a little bit and starting to think like, where can we add little pieces of that to our current tech stack overall? And on the front end side, I think we have kind of two options really to focus on. One is we can work with our current suppliers or current vendors, especially on the digital event platform side. So think like your virtual events, your registration pages, so on and so forth, and kind of rely on their product team to develop AI solutions that we can then use and hope that they're kind of pushing the limits and kind of keeping up with trends. We found kind of that's not so much the case these days. And unless there's a real reason for someone to adapt, hence, the COVID-19 pandemic, for example, when you saw a lot of new innovations come out of that. And the second option, which is kind of what the direction that we've gone in so far with the few areas that we have dabbled with in AI, is onboarding our own platforms and kind of fill the specific need or gap that we have, and then try and kind of integrate that as best we can into whatever other platform we need it to fit into. It hasn't been perfect. I think we have a long way to go, but I think, you know, that's been our general approach. On the back end side, not so much, because there are so many concerns around data analysis and privacy, and it feels like it's really kind of the wild, wild west of, you know, what companies can and can't do with data that's uploaded into the systems. Here at Bloomberg, we have received a mandate, as I'm sure tons of corporations have, not to use services like ChatGPT and others for those very reasons. There is an internal team that's developing kind of our own Bloomberg-specific AI solutions, not necessarily for events, but within the company, so that we are kind of at the forefront of that, and hopefully that will kind of bleed over into the event side at some point. But for right now, kind of there's a lot of guardrails up for using it, especially when it comes to like analyzing data, uploading content, etc. And then on the production side, a few things that I'll save for later. And I think really kind of the idea here, when it comes to kind of going back to the point of, you know, whether we can use it or not, it's with events and technology, we often kind of think about, you know, just because we can, should we? That's often something that comes up in events. Like, yeah, we can do this, but should we be doing this? And I think the added layer here for AI is, you know, should we, but are we also allowed to? And that's a big kind of barrier that we've been facing here so far.
Yeah. And it's a very interesting point you make there around, you know, you just because AI exists, it doesn't mean that it's this big layer. You can choose where you input that. You know, we've done that at Vesio. We've obviously implemented AI strategies and tools, but it's up to our clients to choose whether they want to use that or not. And there's certain parts of our software we have taken a decision not to implement it because of the ethical aspects, you know, the human element side, which we don't want to compromise. So that segues us, I think, very nicely into ethical use of AI, right? This is a hot topic. There's a fear of how it impacts some of the elements of the AI use. But I also think some people are scared that it's going to replace certain aspects, right? But we all agree, I think, from our previous conversations, that it's not going to replace. It's all about enhancing what we currently do. And Marco, you had some thoughts around this, which I would love for you to cover here, if you don't mind.
Yeah, I think we got to be sensitive about this one. Like, is it going to replace jobs? Yes, but how, like, to what degree? That there is an unknown there. But for how the technology exists today, I think it's actually creating more jobs, new jobs, or more skilled jobs, right? So I think right now what we have from generative AI or the output we're getting, it's helping you do more with less, right? It's helping us become more efficient, right? There's a lot of great applications to use generative AI for. And so where I think a lot of us are finding is we can use it to help reduce busy work, help organize notes, help, you know, put ideas together, help kind of give a baseline on a number of different factors. But I've also seen it work in really cool applications. Like you go into, you know, the Tesla manufacturing line. Well, they've replaced a lot of human jobs on the manufacturing line with AI or kind of different components of AI, but they've also generated a whole number of new opportunities where they've brought in and trained people to now work and oversee the technology and kind of supervise it, right? So it's upgraded a lot of like the blue collar workforce to being able to learn new skills and then apply those skills to a more efficient manufacturing line. So yeah, I mean, look, there's a lot of efficiencies around it, using it. And so my sense right now is we can do a lot more with less, leveraging generative AI. So I'm not worried about it not so much taking jobs away, but actually just helping us be more efficient.
But I think that's, you know, when we talked about the different types of AI, right? Those two last elements, they're just in, you know, concept phase, right? It's not going to come into force in the next couple of years, right? That's a lot of technology to develop. And I think as event professionals, anything that can help us with admin work or busy work is a welcomed support source, right? Because it is the fifth most stressful job in the world. So, And Summer, you have a very interesting, if I can call it principle, like rule of thumb of how you implement AI to not take away that human touch and sort of make sure it's still being, reviewed. Can you tell us a little bit about how you use that implementation and make sure it's sort of ethical and implemented in the correct ways?
Yeah, definitely. So we have at my company, we have a 70-30 rule. So the generative AI will get us to 70% on a piece of content, and then that last 30% is always human touch. And what that does is, and again, coming from SEO and really trying to get event and hospitality companies found online, if you type in event planning Chicago, right? If you're not popping up on the first page, the chances of someone clicking into your website are pretty slim to none. And so, we do a lot of that, but we'll go through and do a ton of benchmarking, a ton of competitive research. We'll figure out, what are your competitors doing really well and pull best practices from them. And then we'll feed that into our, we use ChatGPT for the most part, and we'll feed it in and we'll say, okay, we'll have a discussion. It's a dialogue, not a monologue. So it's, ask me questions about this business, and, we'll really whiteboard and go back and forth, and we'll have generative AI then give us, a framework or a structure to work from. I then take that and I turn it over to my copywriters, and then they go and they humanize it, and they spend they still spend a couple of hours weeding through that sentence by sentence and making sure, is it applicable to the company? Is it like actually hitting the goals that we want for this keyword strategy or for this particular company culture, and all of that. So we really, really work hard to make sure that we do that. And then we also feed it through a couple of different AI detectors as well to make sure that, because Google will, they will penalize you if they detect that it is AI. So we want to make sure that we're staying away from that as well.
Yeah. And there's actually been a question in the chat, which I thought is actually quite a good point to bring up now. It goes back to your point about generating product schedules and runs of shows. What information do you have to provide in order for them to give you that? I'm assuming you do the same there. You use the 70-30% rule, right? Gives you an outline. But what information do you put into the AI tool that you use to get you what you need? Like, what should people think about here?
Yeah, I mean, so really it's about, again, we always turn it around. I don't ask AI necessarily to do, that's like 10% of what I do is asking it to do it. What I mostly do is I ask it to ask me questions, because then that'll prompt me to then give it better, the better input you get, the better output you're going to get. And so some of the things that we do is we say, the event is on this date. It's, going to be virtually streamed. And where you have this number of speakers, give me a speaker ready schedule backing up so that, to make sure that if each prep session is 30 minutes, with panelists, when do you need to send out emails? When do you need to follow up with responses? When do you need to schedule this by, to make sure that you're hitting all of those deadlines? And so you can really back it up. And the thing is the more you do it, the more we always go in and we start with prompts we've already built and answers we've already received, and we reopen those threads and then keep going that way to help, to keep refining it. So over time, it does still take a lot of effort. But, all of us that have done production schedules and run of shows know that, what could potentially take 20 hours, we can now do in 5 to 6.
Yeah. And that is a very interesting point that you ask them questions, right? Because people tend to think, they want to know what we want, so we give statements, but actually asking them questions is a very interesting point. So there is a question around as well, which we'll come back to, because I want to ask Marco this question, but also I have a horror story around AI that I want to share. I'm sure some people have seen it recently. But I actually think, following your point here, Summer, I think it's a good point to go in and talk about where have we actually seen really successful implementation of AI, right? Where is it really working for us? Because, as I said, I've been in the event tech industry for about 5 to 6 years now. And I actually said from day one, I believe AI has been underutilized in many different ways, even if in its simplest formats as it used to be. For example, around networking aspects, right? They definitely use this AI, but I think we can improve the use of AI in this. Like personalized schedules. Like if you're going to a 3-day conference, you have 10 different rooms where people can go to, loads of different content. I would love to just go in and say, I'm going to attend the event this day. I'm free on this time. These are my interests. Build me a personalized schedule. I personally haven't seen this somewhere yet, right? Maybe there some conferences do it, but that's stuff that would help me as an attendee, right? And we talked about this because if you would go, we always need that human touch during an event, right? So we can't replace everything with technology. But if you would have a human, in a chat, and someone would ask that question, what sessions shall I go to? These are my interests. This is what I really want to know. They would probably go in and look through the schedule, right? And try to figure out and that's not efficient. Whilst the AI in this instance would be a very efficient use of AI, right? Because it's using that memory. Do you guys have any other sort of, success stories where you think that this is really helped and is going to help build on that? Like, Marco, I'll go to you. You mentioned something during our pre-discussion, but, any success stories, like how you've seen it implemented really, really well?
Yeah, I mean that's our whole mission. I mean that's what gets us out of bed every day, right? We're creating a human layer to large language models. And again, we talked about this. Large language models have been around for a long time, but they're just becoming more and more applicable to our everyday use. But there's still kind of this model that's in a box, and we need to make that box, we need to give it to some human elements. And so that's what we do at Unique. We create actually a couple layers of human components on top of that language model. If we consider it like ChatGPT or Llama or any language model out there that has this kind of human cognition ability to generate content, but it's still a little bit rigid, right? So we add on a personality. We actually design personalities for companies to make the chatbot a bit more human-like, and then we add that human element, which is that avatar, that 3D animation system on top of it. And the output is you then create this human component to what traditionally is just this behind the scenes chatbot type technology. And that's really cool because for us, it's the human touch that makes this interesting. And to your point, we're not trying to replace humans. We're just trying to help us all become more efficient. And so the next piece of that is, how can you leverage a digital human as a personal assistant, or to enhance your knowledge, or to help, right? Like create more efficiency around tasks. And so, Qatar Airlines, for instance, just rolled out the world's first digital flight attendant, leveraging Unique's technology. So it was really cool, right? You can walk up to, and they rolled it out in a couple different modalities. They created a kind of a 3D hologram where you can go up and you can communicate with that. Her name's Sama. You can go up and communicate with her in this hologram form, and you can ask her about flight status. You can ask her if purchase a ticket. You can ask her to upgrade a seat. Whatever you want, she can answer and or perform these tasks for you. That'll then also be available on their website, and you'll have a digital assistant that you can actually have conversations with on the website that can actually execute tasks for you and have the cognition to figure things out rather than being stumped or kind of aggravated by trying to go through the traditional chatbot experience that's very limited. So that's where I see this next levels of AI being supportive and applicable today, right? Like helping being a digital assistant, helping us take care of tasks more effectively. So that's what we're doing in our technology, helping companies become more efficient, helping large companies, customers, have better experiences when, they need to get questions answered quickly and leverage technology to improve their experience. So that's one use case, but we can talk about that one for a while.
Yeah, we can talk about all of this for hours, I'm sure. And Dustin has actually just made a comment in the chat, which I find interesting. He considers ChatGPT as part of the team, right? He wants to focus his time and attention on experience and innovation rather than paperwork. And I think this is an excellent way of looking at it. But without the risk of starting, you know, a massive debate here. You know, RJ, you mentioned this very, very briefly before, and I think it's very different, right? Because you come from a huge global corporation. I think you have some challenges around implementing these like chatbots, and you know, mentioned on a global scale. So what's your thoughts on this, and what's your stance? You know, I guess there might be a personal stance and a company stance, of course, but you know, how have you dealt with this in terms of, you know, looking at this from a global scale?
Yeah, I think personal and professional, I think that there's a trust issues, I think, overall when it comes to kind of AI, chatbots, and those types of things. And you know, I'm very much in the camp of, if I'm trying to get an answer, I usually am pushing 0 on the phone or asking, like, speak to someone in the chatbot, because just we've all been burned in the past, just wasted time trying to kind of get your answer solved. And so I think that there's, you know, regardless of the technology that's out there, and this feels kind of like cryptocurrency to me, unless there's kind of mass adoption and understanding and trust of it, it's kind of going to stay where it is. And we can debate where that is separately, but and so I think that kind of carries over into how we're approaching it for our events here at Bloomberg. In addition to that kind of trust component, we typically lead with kind of that human focused customer support, client support, attendee support. And we'll continue to do that. And so the challenge for us when it comes to the front end kind of user facing components of AI, especially those that might need to provide certain pieces of information or other things, there needs to be kind of some strong balance between optimization from AI and still having that human touch with kind of an umbrella of trust overseeing all of that. Kind of an aside there also is thinking about with a program that's, you know, as large as ours is and global and all the different kind of regions and countries and cultural nuances, is trying to find areas where we can implement new technology, whether it's AI or otherwise, that will have maximum ROI based on our implementation. And so we do have larger events that are very unique in what they do, typically one-off or kind of a part of a smaller program, but focus on larger events where we do curate custom technologies for that. But typically when we approach something with a new technology overall, we're looking at the other 1,800 events that we're doing that year and trying to find kind of commonalities in the challenges that we could, you know, try and solve with the technology. So all that to be said, we've kind of found one main area so far that's been really beneficial for us when it comes to implementing AI, and that's around accessibility. So previously, we didn't have any sort of baseline across the company with our events when it came to accessibility. Obviously, a very important topic, but typically previously very hard to kind of, again, implement a solution at scale across every single event that we do. So we work with a vendor called Wordly AI that specifically focuses in the way that we use them for closed captioning and translations. And so they have kind of the AI side of it, which I think is their bread and butter, but they also have the ability to kind of scale up to a human captioner or translator if you need to. But at minimum, we've been able to leverage this technology and add it into our different digital platforms as kind of a third-party integration to have kind of check the box of what our baseline is for accessibility. And that checking the box, I don't mean that to sound light. I mean it to be like we're able to really kind of build off a foundation from there moving forward, because we were able to implement this technology easily and affordably, whereas before we couldn't do that. So that's been a big one for us. And the second one, kind of smaller, but I am using here one of our VIP speaker kits that kind of came out of the pandemic when we had people remote and all that. We still have the need to kind of ship these out to speakers that need to kind of a nicer look and feel. But we did, you know, we've always experienced kind of the speaker that's off center or whatnot. So we are using this camera here that actually will track me around the room based on you know, the AI technology in that. So, you know, a small little thing, but again, more on the production side, I think it's interesting to see how you can start to implement things that aren't necessarily content or data focused because of the concerns I mentioned before, to still enhance the production value, the user experience, whatever that might be.
And that's super interesting, right? It's like people might not think as that's using something like AI, but it does, right? So it's you know, and it doesn't necessarily need to go down to all that detail about data and things like that. It could look at, you know, this is the accessibility. That's one of your company objectives. That's not necessarily just an event objective or an event ROI. That's something that Bloomberg stands for. So that's a huge implementation process. And I'm really pleased to hear that you've been able to do that. That's a great way of using AI. So thank you for sharing that. Summer, I want to move on to you because you and I had a amazing discussion around this, around successful implementation of AI as well, but more from a speaker perspective, right? We know that if we have the right speakers, we have the right content, people will come to the event. But how do we know if they're actually the right speaker or getting the right sentiment? And we discussed a tool called Seen as AI, right? Who who can actually, they have an ethical phase analysis program based on AI. So they can scan people's impressions, the demographics, positive sentiments, etc. And they can do that without collecting any personal data. So they can still provide a lot of data that we can use to then translate into, better events moving forward. But you have a story around this, which I found really interesting as well, because I believe, I can't remember if you said you used Seen for this, but please share your story around this.
Yeah, I'm going to change a few identifying details, but I was part of a production team, and we were putting together content for a general session and the keynote, and it was a nonprofit. And of course, you have a lot of times you have a board and you have personalities and that. And there was one particular board member that had been a board member for decades and was convinced that her particular session was the session everybody would attend. She was really a big draw for the events, and that it was just a non-negotiable that she was going to be anything but, the internal keynote on opening day. And so we installed the Zenus cameras in general session, which of course faces the audience and gives a sentiment. We also installed them in a bunch of the activations around the space just to figure out, what are people really interacting with? What are their sentiments, positive, neutral, negative, and all of that kind of stuff. And, we get to the data and we start looking at it on the back end. And, here's this board member who is, has made lots of big declarations about how she's, the biggest draw of this organization. And she was actually like second to last in terms of positive sentiments. As she was speaking, her audience was very distracted. They were looking around. They weren't really engaging with her at all. They weren't connecting at all with what she was saying. So, it made it a very much easier conversation to not even have to tell her, you're not great. People are not drawn for, they are not coming here for you, but to be able to just show the data, in a wrap up and, just be able to have the data actually be make the case for us that, if you really want to continue to drive this event, make it bigger year over year, build in better content, build in better speakers, she needs to not be on that list moving forward. So.
Well, but that is such a good point, right? Because we sometimes think that the biggest names or, are going to draw the biggest attention, but actually may not be. And again, it could be about the topic, it could be about the content, and to be able to gather that information and utilize and, sort of provide that in by technology is super interesting, in my opinion. And I'm really excited to see where that goes. And again, it works with that ethical use, right? It's not collecting any personal data. So it's just analyzing the room. And I believe Michael here in the chat as well, Michael Kloss has actually just mentioned this as well. An aspect he finds really interesting around using AI is predicting the human behaviors, right? So looking at, for example, how does people move during a conference, an exhibition, where do they go? When do they go there? How do they interact with certain activation zones and things like that? That's the data that's really going to help us be able to transform our events. So thank you for sharing that, Michael. And also, Kevin, I stand corrected. Thank you for saying that IBM Watson has been using these personalized schedules for 9 years. I don't attend every event, so I'm glad I know about this, and I'm going to try and look into that at some point. So thank you for sharing that. Before we sort of wrap up and then finish off with the last final questions as well, and I'm going to ask you all to sort of share what you're excited for in the future, but it'd be interesting to share some of these horror stories as well, right? I'm fairly certain that all of you have also seen recently, Skift Meetings published an article around a company who was delivering a Willy Wonka experience in Scotland. And they have overused AI. let's just put it frankly, they had generated images, the content, even the actors' scripts for the events was used using AI, which basically just meant that the actors didn't even know what they were saying because it was so fluffy, right? And the images looked amazing. But how can you replicate that into human experience, right? If you see those images, you're going to think, oh, this is going to be something else, like probably a Sphere in Las Vegas experience, which it obviously turned out not to be. So there's obviously ways of overusing AI. And I think, to your point there, they didn't use the 7:30 rule, Ashley. I was just about to say that. They didn't listen to Summer, which I think, but do you guys have any other small horror stories or little pointers around what has gone wrong with AI? No? That was a question we hadn't prepared, so I just threw it out there. That's all good. So,
I mean, look, I can look. We've all, I think. So let me think about how to put this. RJ brought up a good use, and specifically for translation. And so I spent a lot of time deploying language models for translation, and it's leveraging a little bit older technology that's coined like reinforcement learning, where a human will actually look at what the machine output is, and then they will review and tell that machine that, hey, you translated this, you translated this wrong, right? And so it's now we've gone towards this version of self-supervised learning, which is what ties into the generative AI, which allows AI to now be more conversational and create content a lot faster. And so that's where we really get into the ethical use, because the AI now can create content at such a scale that without the right kind of guardrails or training, you can go in any number of directions. And so that's when it goes in different directions, that's called a hallucination, right? And so a hallucination is when AI says something off the wall. And there's something that's been surfacing around, I forget whose chatbot was saying, President Lincoln was, it came up with some ridiculous stats about President Lincoln, and so that was one of the things that recently has gotten a lot of press around. And so I think when it goes back to leveraging AI, the first piece of leveraging good AI is training it correctly. There's a whole nother conversation around AI being biased, and based on GPT's input, its output is biased. Like, that's another conversational piece. But on top of any model, we can now create these layers of additional fine-tuning and reinforcement to help get the output we want. And so when you think about it, like if you're using AI for some like completing busy work or whatnot, if you bring in a personal assistant, you're not going to hire someone without experience, right? Like experience is what that creates a guardrail that someone is going to actually perform the tasks that you want them to in the way that you want them to. And so AI is the same way, right? Like you have to make sure that AI has the experience you want, and it's proven time and time again that it's going to give you the output that you want, right? So that's the big layer of this, where we can continue to train and put guardrails around the AI that allow it to produce the output that you want. But the important thing I think here is that we do build the trust around it, because one of the things a lot of companies ask me for is they say, well, we want to dictate exactly what the output is. We want to dictate exactly what AI is going to say. And I said, yeah, you can do that, but you're looking at technology that's 5 years, 10 years old. Like just go ahead and implement a chatbot, and you can dictate everything you want it to say. If you want AI to have a conversation, you can't script it to the point, you can't overkill the script, right? You have to allow it to actually generate a conversation that feels natural and can still provide the output that you want. And so that's where we get into that world of like, what is, how do we create those guardrails? How do we create the right output? I've seen a lot of examples of bad output. I was working with a big media company, and one of the translation words that is used in somewhere in the South is something like, oh, I can't even remember it. Something turned into sausage water, and it was like something about a play in soccer that's a very commonly used term, and like the output just wasn't right. Like it didn't feel right. So we went back in and you tweak it a little bit and you say, no, this doesn't mean sausage water. This means bad play, right? So you make slight adjustments as you go. Of course, we all say things we shouldn't say, and we learned that was an awkward thing to say. Like, I don't know if I should have just said sausage water, but it's too late. It's been said. So, anyways, AI learns, we teach it, and we ultimately will get the outputs that we want.
Well, it's the same as human beings, though, right? We learn as we go along. Sorry, RJ. Yeah, go on.
I was going to say something very similar. I think when it comes to, I think during the COVID-19 pandemic, when we were kind of moving quickly and using all this technology, the people kind of forgot that technology is never going to be 100% perfect.
Mm-hmm.
Yes. Uptime is never going to be 100%. You strive for as close to that as possible. And I think kind of that's the same case with AI. Everyone thinks it's good, I think maybe due to Hollywood, other things, that it's this perfect thing that's going to take over and solve all the problems and be 100% when it's not. I mean, it's far from it, I think, in many cases, to Marco's point. But I do think that it's similar to humans. Humans are not 100% every single time. And so again, when you're thinking about the events and execution and scale, I am often, luckily not too often these days, but enough, having to talk to stakeholders to remind them, like, hey, we're human. Like, we forgot to check a box. Sorry, we'll adjust this. We'll fix it for the next time. And I think we kind of have to keep that in mind when it comes to AI. But also, to Marco's point, have those guardrails in place, have the human input in place to be able to adjust as you need to and put the different kind of settings in there to get what you want. Going back to accessibility quickly, I had someone recently kind of inquire about how do we get transcripts in real time immediately following an event, and was taking them through, and they're like, oh, I know that company, it wasn't that great last time I used it. And I think things are moving quick and things are getting better, and these products are being enhanced daily. And so what maybe wasn't that great 6 months ago is most likely vastly different now. And also, in that scenario too, we've been able to kind of implement certain words, names, et cetera, that are specific to that event to make sure that we can get as close to the translation, the caption, the whatever it might be, as possible. And so again, that's on the human part of the event manager, the event tech, marketing manager, to control that and own that, and not just rely on the AI doing everything there.
We all need training. We all need to develop. We all evolve, right? And the same for tech, as you said. No tech is perfect because you have bugs, you have Wi-Fi connectivity issues, you have hardware issues. It's going to happen. So very, very good point. So we have 10 minutes left. The last couple of minutes before we then go to some of the questions, I want to know, where would you like to see this going? What's your pie in the sky, so to say? Marco, hit you up first here.
Yeah, I mean, my pie in the sky is just continuing to build trust around AI, continuing to train these models to allow us to take more risk and implement them more and have fun with them, right? There's a lot that can be gained by leveraging AI. So of course there's the multiple barriers we need to get through, right? Let's not be afraid of it. Let's start to train it. And let's start getting some great outputs that make our life, that optimize our life. There's a lot of educational components to it that can allow us to, one thing to me is I'm really passionate about specifically is deep fakes and identifying deep fakes or identifying misinformation. My friend's great, awesome company, digital Reality Defender, right? They leverage AI to identify deep fakes, right? And so we've been dealing with this, especially over COVID, where people read something on Instagram and they assume it's true, and that drives me crazy, right? Dude, do your research. And so there's that whole component of it. Let's fact check. Let's use AI to actually look at what's being said, and let's have a quick fact check. So there's so many different applications to it, but I think with misinformation and deep fakes and whatnot, there's going to be a big piece of this is just identifying what's real, what's not, especially at the scale of content that's going to be created. So yeah, there's a lot of great applications, but that's.
It can help us become more secure in one way, right? As well, you know, and I think we often forget to look at it from the other way, right? Exactly what Summer said. We need to ask them questions rather than just giving an input, so to say. Very, very good point, Mark, and I agree. I think, you know, we just need to take the bull by its horn, right? And just seize this opportunity and, you know, help train and learn and develop a, you know, very good tool. Summer, I'm going to go to you next. What's your pie in the sky? What's your dreams?
Yeah, I mean, I think that you know, it's not enough anymore to get somebody to just purchase a ticket for an event, right? How do we turn them into ambassadors? How do we turn them into, you know, a person that's going to go out and champion the event for future years and say to everyone that they meet, you know, this was an absolutely incredible experience, but also being able to use, I think, AI to personalize that to another level, you know, whether it be, you know, how you intake information, how you really do a conference. Everybody does conferences differently. Everybody learns differently. And I think AI can really be an instrumental tool in figuring out how to make these events be as personal as possible and really fine-tuned to how you experience, how you learn, and you know, all of that kind of stuff. And it's you know, we're already starting to see it, and it's really exciting because I really think that helps build you know, it helps build an event's brand. It helps build, you know, it helps move you know, from just attendees into, you know, champions of the event and the brand for future years.
Yeah, very good point. RJ.
Yes. You know, I think my pie in the sky may not be too far off. I think it's probably something that can be done today. So pie in the sky in relation to what I can do within my current role within the current organization that I work in. And that is around, I think, data. I feel like oftentimes when we're looking for trends, when we're approaching an event program and determining kind of the format, is it in person, is it virtual, is it hybrid, dealing with certain stakeholders who don't want to do virtual anymore because they're sick and tired of it, and you know, want to go back to the way things were in 2019 and before. And I want to get to a point where we can take data, the large amounts of data that we gather from our events program, and leverage whether it's a custom GPT or something else, and be able to kind of cut through the noise of kind of internal preference and opinion, and just really provide straightforward facts on, you might feel that way, you might not like virtual events, and that's okay. But if we were to add a virtual component to this, you're going to increase, you know, reach by X%, you know, whatever that might be. And you know, the Bloomberg itself is a company that's driven, you know, very largely on data in all parts of the company, the events and marketing team as well. But this is one area that I think is kind of specific to my focus that we often aren't able to provide solutions to. And I think that there's kind of two parts of that. I won't ramble too much longer, I promise. But one is kind of like the amount of data that we collect, like what are our baselines from a Bloomberg events program perspective, and what versus industry. And you know, I think to date, like, we've relied on certain platforms like Bizzabo or Notified or others to send us their industry trends reports for the year. What's the best day to do a webinar? What's the best, you know, time for this and that? And I think those are all helpful, but I really like to see us in a place where we can start to leverage some of those, some of the AI technologies to formulate kind of internal best practices, as well as real-time industry best practices, in addition to cutting through the noise and really kind of letting people know what they should be doing based on, you know, factual data sets.
Yeah, there's obviously industry standards, but there's so many variables, right? And it's, you know, what's right for your organization may not be right for another organization, right? Yeah. It's all about the attendee. So that makes sense. I'm sure all the people who are sitting here on this webinar now is like, okay, I'm going to get onto it. I'm going to reach out to RJ. So maybe you'll get an explosion of solutions at some point, which isn't a bad thing, you know, I guess. So I think, you know, we've got 4 minutes left. We got a couple of questions. I'm not sure if we're going to be able to walk through them all, but there has been a question from Frank Berman who basically says, where are the limitations of liability when AI falls short? I think Kevin and Dustin has had some conversations in the chat. I've been trying to follow along at it at the same time here, but they're talking about, you know, we're potentially focusing too much on efficiency rather than quality, which I think is a very, very valid point as well. But also, you know, we shouldn't use AI to replace what we don't know, right? You know, it's the same as going into a job. Like if you don't know how to do a task, you know, well, some people will make it up, but that's going to end up in disaster in the end, right? But do you guys have any other thoughts around this? Where could the limitations of liability when AI falls short? You know, like, is it down to the organizer? Is that our responsibility? You know, which I would probably say that that's my personal opinion around it, because it's, you know, you've used it, but, you know, Summer, Marco, RJ, any other thoughts around that?
I mean, we're ultimately responsible, right? If we're putting it out, but that's what it comes down to. It is up to me to make sure that I am, like Marco said, you verifying it, you know, and making sure that it is accurate and making sure that it's not somebody else's work, and making sure that, you know, if I do put it out, I'm ultimately responsible for it.
Yep, definitely agree with that.
Yeah,
I'm on the same. Look, we gotta, you treat it as, you know, you got to consider it, you know, part of your employee, like part of your staff. And I think someone said that, right? Like GPT is part of the team. And so ChatGPT has been around for little less than 2 years, I think. And so how many of us hire, you know, someone with 2 years experience to perform like, you know, customer facing, you know, content at events, or, you know, like being the customer service representative on your website. But look, what we're doing with AI is we're actually creating experiences where you can role play with the AI, so we can help train people more effectively before, you know, they're getting in front of, you know, 100 people on a, you know, watching a panel or answering technical questions, whatnot. So you got to be responsible, but there's also ways to actually make us as humans more responsible leveraging AI as well.
Absolutely. Well, guys, thank you so much. I'm going to hand over to Ashley, Basama, Marco, RJ. Thank you so much. Been super interesting. And thank you all for joining us from around the world today. And Ashley, over to you.
Yes, thank you, panel. What a great discussion. So many, I was loving keeping up in the chat. Typically, we hope you're not on the phone during our webinar, but for this time, I'm going to let you cheat. This is just a quick survey. I think it's literally 3 questions. I practiced. You can answer it in 26 seconds. So if you want to take 1 second, just capture that so you can complete the survey. This helps us to plan for webinars in the future. Speaking of the future, save the date. Our April webinar on Earth Day, also known as April 22nd, will be on sustainability. We're talking about practical sustainability in events. That's what we really want to tackle when we're talking about webinars and our content. We want to make sure that we are giving you applicable how to use them day to day in your life. How can we make your events more sustainable in a real way? And then lastly, you can check out our brand new website and catch all of our previous webinars. They are available. You can also keep up with our new webinars by subscribing to Backstage Chatter and also by subscribing to our social medias. Our LinkedIn, our Meta accounts, we will always be sure to post our upcoming webinars. So I just want to thank the panel one last time. Thank the attendees. We look forward to seeing you in April. Everybody have a wonderful rest of your day.
Thank you all. Have a good day.